This is example 1 for the introduction to assembly files. In early lessons, we looked at what assembly files were and how to manipulate them, but now we're ready to begin putting assembly files together. So the first step is to start a blank assembly file. To do so, select New, and then select the inch assembly template and select OK. Now that we have a blank assembly file open, we're prompted to insert our first part. We can either select a part that's currently open in SOLIDWORKS, or we can select Browse to find a part file. Let's select Browse. By default, we're opened into the window where our assembly was for the training file that we previously opened to access this video. So we simply need to open the example 1 starting point files folder, and we want to insert the first starting point file and select Open. Simply select the check mark, and we've dropped our first part into our assembly with its origin in the same location as the assembly origin. We'll also note that there's an F beside this first part, and the F stands for fixed. This means that this part is fixed. It's locked in with the same coordinate system as our assembly. Okay, with that first part in, we can now add our second component. So again, we'll select Insert Component, and this brings up that same dialog box that was there when we first started our assembly. Again, select Browse, and this time select Starting Point File 2 and select Open. Instead of pressing the check mark and locking it to the origin, although in this case the origins would match up, we want to simply drop the part by clicking within the graphics area, and then we can rotate our assembly around and we can see our new part moves. There's a small negative sign beside the part. That means the part is still floating. So we need to begin adding mates to attach parts together. Mates are very similar to relationships in a sketch. However, a mate is used to attach different parts together in an assembly. Now, to add a mate, we simply select the paperclip. You'll also see that I've added a keyboard shortcut Q for adding mates. If you've installed the keyboard shortcuts from Inspirtech, you will also have the Q command to add a mate. So select the mate command, and then select two faces that you want to attach together. So I'll select this face and this face. And that's created what's called a coincident mate. If I accept that mate, you'll see that now these faces will always be in contact. However, not necessarily in the same plane. It can move side to side and up and down. So we need to finish defining the mates. I'm going to press Q to activate my mate command. I'll select the front face of the second part and the front face of the first part. And we've again added a coincident mate to line those up. So now there's simply 1 degree of freedom. We've locked in 2 degrees of freedom. We've locked in these two faces and these two faces, so we just have to add that last degree of freedom. Let's select the bottom 2 faces and make them coincident as well. And now we've locked in the 3 degrees of freedom. I'll press OK to get out of the mate command, and we can see there's no longer anything in brackets in front of that part file. This means it's fully locked in our three-dimensional world without being fixed to the origin. It's locked in using mates. Okay, we're ready to add our next part. Again, select Insert Component, select Browse, select Part 3, select Open, and drop the part. We'll press Q to activate the mate command, and select those two mates. Now I should point out that it's possible that your part mates the opposite way that it should. So if you select the flip mate icon, this will flip what side that part is coincident on. You'll also see that there are other mates that you could add using those same two faces. However, we do want to use the coincident mate, so again we'll select OK. I'll mate the bottom faces. And again, lastly, the sides. Having my three mates, I've defined all 3 degrees of freedom. So I can add my next component. I'll press Escape to get out of the mate command, and insert components again. Again, I'll press Q to begin mating. And at times we'll see that we need to move that part out of the way so that we can see both the faces that need to be mated. Now there is another way to insert parts into an assembly. We can select our design library, select the folder where the files are, and simply drag and drop from the design library. You'll see that that activates the command so you can continue to drop parts. Once you've dropped the one part you need, press Escape. However, if you wanted multiples, you could continue to drop parts. I'm going to conclude adding the mates for this piece. Then press Escape to get out of the mate command and come over, and now I'm just going to drag all of my parts over to speed this process up a little bit. The other thing, we need 2 of this file too, so I can either go to the design library and drag it over again, or I can hold Control down and select it on the feature tree and drag a new one onto my screen. So now I have all of my parts here. I'll continue adding my mates. I'm just pressing the Enter key once I've got my 2 faces selected to accept that mate, minimizing my keystrokes. Again, I'll just continue to add my mates. The tops of these 2 lined up. Now you'll see that I mated these 2 faces instead of these 2 faces. So how do I change a mate? There are 2 ways of doing that. I can select the part, and then on the feature tree, select the plus sign, and you'll see there's a folder for mates. If I select the plus sign beside that, I have a list of all the mates that are in that component. I could also activate my full list of mates from the bottom of my feature tree. However, I do want to select the mate from the component. I'll select the mate that I want to change, right click it, and say Edit Feature. I can now unselect the face I didn't want and select my new face and select OK. So we can see changing mates is rather simple. The other thing you can see is I'm having trouble actually activating the face. Oftentimes I'm getting the line. So if I press F5, I'll activate my selection filter toolbar. Selection filter toolbar is this icon right here. So F5 activates that toolbar. I'll turn faces on. Then I'm going to hide my toolbar again by selecting F5. And now SOLIDWORKS will filter the fact that I only want to select faces. So it won't allow me to select the other geometry that I don't want to select. And this again is going to speed up the process for mating your files together. Again, you'll see that I have to rotate my part around a little bit to finally get it exactly where I want. And I can deactivate my filter by selecting F5. I'll toggle that filter off. Select F5 again to hide my filter toolbar. And with that, we've concluded our first assembly. You can see we have all our parts in the feature tree. One of them's fixed, and the rest of those parts are fully located in the 3 dimensions. I trust this example will be a help, and the multiple use of the coincident mate will help you understand how the coincident mate works. Now I would like to add one more thing though. So I'm going to drag one more part over and just point out what would happen if you accidentally mated 2 edges together, like I've done there. Since I mated the 2 edges, my part acts like a hinge. So if you have the part acting like a hinge, it's probably because you mated 2 edges. The other thing you might do is accidentally mate an edge and a face. And now it hinges and also moves up and down. So you've added that mate, but it's quite awkward in how it works. I trust this will be a help in resolving what problems can happen with the coincident mate. I'll just go ahead and delete those 2 parts from my assembly by holding Control to select both of them and pressing the delete key. Yes, I would like to delete them. That concludes this example. Go ahead and save the file in your working directory.